March 11, 2021, a resolution passes in Beijing. No debate, no cameras, just a show of hands in the Great Hall of the People. 2,025 votes in favor, 0 against, 1 abstention. The document is 43 pages long. Most of it is procedural language about candidacy rules and committee structures. By the time Hong Kong wakes up the next morning, the decision is already law. No one fires a shot. No one needs to. For 24 years, Hong Kong operated under a promise. One country, two systems. The phrase appeared in every official document, every diplomatic exchange, every reassurance to foreign investors. It meant Hong Kong would keep its courts, its press, its elections. Beijing would handle defense and foreign policy. Everything else stayed local. The promise had an expiration date, 2047. But until then, autonomy was supposed to be guaranteed. The system wasn't a democracy, not fully. Half the legislature was chosen by voters. The other half came from functional constituencies, business groups, professional associations, trade unions loyal to Beijing. The chief executive was selected by a committee, not direct vote. But there was room to maneuver. Opposition candidates could win seats. Protests could force policy changes. The court still ruled against the government sometimes. That margin, narrow as it was, mattered. In 2019, 2 million people filled the streets. They were protesting an extradition bill that would allow suspects to be sent to mainland China for trial. The bill was withdrawn, but the protests didn't stop. They grew, they fractured. Some demanded universal suffrage, others called for independence. A few threw Molotov cocktails at police stations. Beijing watched. To party officials, this looked like chaos spreading. To Hong Kong's opposition, it looked like the last chance to preserve something. Both were right. The national security law came first in June 2020. It criminalized secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. The definitions were broad. The penalties were severe, up to life imprisonment. Trials could be held in secret. Suspects could be extradited to the mainland. Opposition lawmakers called it the end of the rule of law. Pro-Beijing officials called it return to stability. But the law didn't touch elections, not directly. That came 9 months later. The resolution passed in March 2021 didn't abolish elections, it restructured them. The number of seats in the Legislative Council increased from 70 to 90. That sounds like expansion. It wasn't. The proportion elected by the public dropped from half to less than a quarter. The rest would come from functional constituencies and a new body, the Election Committee. The Election Committee itself grew from 1,100 members to 1,500. It would choose 40 legislators directly. It would also screen every candidate for the remaining seats, both the geographic ones and the functional ones. And it would select the chief executive, as it always had. The committee's composition changed. Seats once held by elected district councilors, many of whom were opposition figures, disappeared. New seats went to representatives from mainland Chinese business interests and Hong Kong deputies to national bodies in Beijing. The opposition didn't just lose influence, they lost access. One more clause appeared deep in the resolution. Every candidate, before running, would need to satisfy a new vetting process. A committee would review their loyalty to the basic law and their allegiance to the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. Who sat on that committee? Officials appointed by the chief executive. Who was the chief executive? Someone chosen by the election committee. The circle closed. No one called it a coup. The word implies force, resistance, a sudden rupture. This was procedural. The changes fit within the legal framework Beijing had always reserved the right to interpret. Hong Kong's government didn't collapse. It continued. Chief Executive Carrie Lam praised the reforms as a return to patriots governing Hong Kong. Bureaucrats updated voter registration forms. Electoral officers prepared new guidelines. In Washington and London, officials condemned the move. They called it a violation of the Sino-British Joint Declaration. Beijing dismissed the complaints. That treaty, they said, was a historical document with no binding authority. Investors barely flinched. The Hang Seng Index dipped, then recovered. Banks stayed open. Luxury stores still sold handbags on Canton Road. The system absorbed the change. By December 2021, the first election under the new rules took place. Turnout was 30%, the lowest in Hong Kong's history. Opposition groups, what remained of them, called for a boycott. Some candidates withdrew, others were disqualified during the vetting process. Every seat went to a pro-establishment figure. The legislature, once a space where opposition voices could delay bills, question officials, and force compromises, became unanimous. Debates shortened. Votes passed faster. Committee hearings grew quieter. One lawmaker described it as efficient. The restructuring didn't need tanks because it didn't need to break anything. It simply rearranged who could participate. If you were a business leader with ties to the mainland, your influence increased. If you were a lawyer, a teacher, a social worker aligned with the opposition, your pathway to representation vanished. The system didn't ban dissent. It made dissent irrelevant. There's a type of control that doesn't look like control. It looks like order. It presents itself as stability. It operates through paperwork, committees, eligibility requirements. It doesn't jail everyone, just enough people. It doesn't censor every newspaper, just the ones that matter. It survives because it never gives a clear target to resist. When the extradition bill was proposed in 2019, people knew what they were fighting: a specific law, a specific risk. The protests had focus. But how do you protest a candidacy vetting process? How do you march against the composition of a committee? You can't fill the streets over a flowchart. Beijing's calculation was precise. The cost of sending in the People's Liberation Army would have been enormous. International condemnation, capital flight, the destruction of Hong Kong's reputation as a stable financial hub. The cost of doing nothing was worse: an opposition that kept winning seats, kept blocking legislation, kept proving that dissent could survive under Chinese sovereignty. The restructuring split the difference. It preserved the appearance of elections while eliminating uncertainty. Hong Kong still votes. The mechanics remain. But the outcome is no longer in doubt. What made this possible wasn't just Beijing's power, it was Hong Kong's vulnerability. The city had no military, no ability to print its own currency, no control over its borders. Its economy depended on access to mainland markets. Its legal system, for all its independence, operated under a framework Beijing could reinterpret. Autonomy, in the end, was a privilege, and privileges can be revoked. The opposition had believed the international community would intervene. They believed business interests would push back. They believed the promise of 50 years mattered. They were wrong on all three counts. By 2023, nearly every major opposition figure had either fled, been jailed, or gone silent. Stan News, an independent outlet, shut down after its editors were arrested. The Professional Teachers Union disbanded. The Civil Human Rights Front, which organized the 2019 marches, dissolved. None of this required mass arrests, just enough pressure applied strategically to make continued resistance untenable. Organizations didn't fight to the end. They calculated the cost and closed their doors. There's a pattern here, visible in other places, other moments. Chile in 1973, Turkey in 2017, Hungary over the past decade. Democracy doesn't usually end with soldiers in the streets. It ends with procedural changes, electoral commissions, court appointments, media regulations. Each adjustment on its own seems technical. Collectively, they shift the balance. The mechanism is simple. Increase the cost of opposition until only the most committed remain. Then isolate them. Then wait. Hong Kong's case is distinct in one way. The city never had full democracy to begin with. What it had was space, a margin where opposition could exist, where courts could rule independently, where protests could force the government to retreat. That margin is gone, not because it was destroyed in a single dramatic act, but because it was narrowed, election by election, reform by reform, until nothing remained. The resolution passed on March 11, 2021, is still law. The Legislative Council still meets. Elections still happen. The chief executive still gives speeches about Hong Kong's future as a global financial center. From the outside, it looks functional. But functionality isn't freedom, and procedure isn't democracy. Beijing proved something in Hong Kong. You don't need to abolish institutions. You just need to control who gets to use them. The method is quiet. The result is permanent, and it requires no tanks at all.